Okay, everyone, I think we'll see if we can get this started. Again, my name is Clayton Smith. I am the project director, principal investigator with the research group that is sponsoring this symposium, courtesy of the Social Science, Humanities, and Research Council of Canada. I'm supposed to do some things here. Let's see. I'm with the University of Windsor in Canada, for those of you who don't know that. My background is that I have worked in higher education all my professional life in 4 different institutions in 2 countries, consulted 50 others. So I kind of have a bit of a wide background, I suppose, and have been back in teaching for the past 5-6 years. And I suppose something that interests me, it says here, well, I like doing this kind of stuff. And so I like doing conferences, I like engaging with colleagues, but I also like just doing something different every once in a while, and that's kind of what this is all about. And anything else you think the audience should know? Well, I think you know pretty much everything, so we'll just jump right into it. There's a relatively small group of us here today, so let me see what the numbers are. About 20 of us at the moment. So I'm going to make the grand assumption that many, if not all of you, were present yesterday for our discussions. The purpose of this gathering is to chat, to talk amongst ourselves, to reflect on what we heard yesterday, and to think about maybe what research is yet to be done in this field, and give us a chance to identify perhaps some areas of interest and maybe some things that we can colleague up on as we go forward through the day or after the symposium. So let me just offer a few questions for us to kind of just sort of throw out there and see if we can get started with. And I would just ask you to raise your hand so that I'm supposed to get this started. Maybe you can get a little less formal as we go along. But the first question that we have here for the group is, did the research theories or research findings presented yesterday align with your personal experience with online learning during the pandemic? What were the similarities? What were the differences? So did you hear things that aligned with what your experiences were telling you? And if you have a thought, just raise your hand and we'll go from there. Oh, come on, somebody jump in for me.
Here, Clayton, I'll just share some slides from yesterday's debrief and synthesis session. It's Nabucco Fujita, and here we go. So you can take a look at those. I fixed my sharing problems too.
You did?
You did. I hope so. I didn't test it out, but I'll just say hi to everyone.
There it is. We see you.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to hear what people have to say about what this theme is. What is the theme for this one?
This is one about
our first theme. Yeah, just the teaching practices to enhance what is it? Online international students learning. So if you open up the link, I just captured a couple of student presentations. So that gives you a bit of background, and then Shani and Chenzi's theoretical and conceptual frameworks. Those are just some of the things. And Jess Mitchell's tweet responding to Nadia, Emily, and Shannon's keynote as well. Everybody's been quiet.
Yeah, they're just waking up, I think.
Oh, we got a hand up though, I think.
Okay, let's see who we have here. We have, let's go with Francis first.
Hi, I'm talking to you from beautiful Aurelia.
Oh, wow.
I'm with Lakehead University, and I thought I'd start off because I think I probably have less to say than others, because this my experience teaching international students was pretty well limited to teaching an MEd course. And the reason why I was interested in joining this symposium is I feel that I wasn't as knowledgeable about teaching international students as I should have been. And so this has been very useful so far. But I think looking at the question, did the research findings align with my experience during the pandemic? I was heartened by one of the speakers who talked about how the experience of being online was beneficial for me. I feel it was the best teaching I've ever done because it was the most intentional, and it was the most I knew what I wanted to do, where I was going. The planning was so much more I was much better planned. Everything was much better planned, and yet I don't feel that I was engaging enough, in particular for my international students. And I think by using what the research is telling us about engaging international students, I'm going to improve my online teaching for all of my students. And I will be teaching out of my course load. Half of my course load will be online asynchronous teaching. So the research in terms of asynchronous teaching is of particular interest to me.
Thank you very much. As it turns out, a lot of us are having that kind of a balance, myself included. So I'd be interested in hearing from others. And so we have a few others with their hands up. So Louisa.
Good morning, everybody. I'm actually in Medellin, Colombia, but I teach for the University of Central Florida in beautiful Orlando. I had to transition kind of abruptly in March. I had to also train about 20 faculty members to go from face-to-face classes for, 20 different sections to completely go online in about 2 days. So to us, that was really interesting. I teach for their intensive English program currently. And I think the students did a really great job in adapting to the online because they were more tech savvy than some of our instructors. I think that the resistance came from the instructors wanting to continue the same idea of teaching a face-to-face class, just doing it online. But as the time went by, our retention stayed. And I think one of the more relevant things that we were able to do was to keep our students. And one of the things one of our students said in one of the sessions yesterday was that he felt the routine was important, to stay connected to his instructors, to not have, because there was nothing else to do other than to come to class, right? To see the people that he was used to seeing. And another thing that Dr. Nadia mentioned yesterday was that the grading part of it, I thought that was really interesting. I do have a hard time sometimes assigning grades to students because I feel like they've worked really hard, and I don't want to measure them like it's a competition, the idea of competing for a grade. So I thought that was really an interesting theory and something that we'll probably be exploring farther as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I think those are some of the challenges that we're all kind of thinking about these days. I think sometimes in the face-to-face, we're used to doing things in some very traditional ways, and we don't question it so much. But when we go online and we go into this new place, it makes us be, as was indicated earlier, more intentional. And in doing that, we think about these kinds of things. So very good thoughts. Juan, over to you.
Good morning. So my name is Juan Rodriguez. I work with the University of New Brunswick in Fredericton. And it's a wonderful day today here. So I'm very happy and pleased just to share with all of you in this amazing symposium. So my thoughts are focused on exactly the challenges that we are having with coping with COVID-19 situation. So that from Nadia, I was reflecting on her provocative ideas of how we are doing and resolving the COVID-19 needs by doing exactly the same. we are doing face-to-face, but now online. So I mean, reproducing what we know is working in face-to-face courses, but now just changing the way that we are delivering our classes and using online systems, but without changing the basic ideas or the principles of education. And she invited us just to think about marking and the competition model for the collaborative model. And this is kind of resonates with my experience working with different universities. So then perhaps this is probably a great idea to start thinking in terms of research, how we are going to move from individual and local perspectives to a better global perspective, including systemic teaching. How we can change this collaborative model and infuse education with this collaborative model instead of competitive models. And it touches from different universities, because how we are going to break the barriers between institutions and start, instead of thinking on competition between institutions and faculty members, start creating networks of collaboration and support. So that is probably one of my main ideas, but there's plenty of other great suggestions. Thank you.
Well, that's a great one, and I think we heard yesterday in a variety of our discussions about this whole issue, and you've captured it well with the idea of collaboration versus competition. It wasn't that long ago, as it turns out, that there weren't grades in higher education. Yale started us on this road, about 100 years ago, and before that, there weren't grades. And so it's interesting to go back to that time to ask ourselves, well, why is that, and how have we changed? And to be honest with you, we've changed a lot as a society in that period of time. We measure a lot more things, we critique a lot more things, and so, but finding balance between collaboration and competition sounds like a worthy research topic. I'm going to go to Kaylee next. Kaylee?
Hi everyone, it's actually Callie. It's weird, don't worry. Rhymes with Sally. I'm joining everybody from Medicine Hat, Alberta, which is a small city south of Calgary. If people have heard of that, it's about 3 hours away. And I teach at the Medicine Hat College, our local community college. And I just feel like it's so great to be here. This has been such an exciting and invigorating last couple of days, and like everyone else, I'm flipping tired. I'm so tired. And I was sort of like, trying to fit this in, but I'm so glad that I have, because it's left me with lots of great thoughts and questions and resources and areas to explore. And I agree with everybody and everything that's been said so far. Just a couple things. I was a naysayer when we were going to have to flip online. I was one of those people that thought, how am I going to bring my exciting energy and all the fun things I do in the classroom online? And I was quite nervous. And I was pleasantly surprised how you can create community online and all the things that you can do, and you can still bring yourself to the virtual classroom. And I found that a good teacher is a good teacher, it doesn't matter what format you use. That being said, just to kind of tag on, there were some challenges. And for me, some of the challenges have been the disparity, because we rely heavily on adjunct. And those people got no extra funding or money to do, to flip their classes to online. No extra workload hours, no extra pay. So that was tricky and fundamentally unfair. I think post-secondaries are, pretty notorious for taking advantage of adjunct faculty. And then the other challenge for me was skill-based classes. So I teach in the social work program, and we have counseling classes. And, you know, online counseling is its own challenge, but to try to teach students the fundamentals online was a real challenge. And a particular challenge was teaching international students online. So with I loved that story yesterday. If people were in Jess's section about her student who was trying to get home to Zimbabwe, and I had two students I built a really close relationship with in India. And if you can look at the stats of the numbers of COVID in India and the amount of trauma that these students were experiencing, 19 and 20 years old, going to school in a, you know, or halfway around the world and learning in your second language. And your family is, you know, in a precarious situation. Your country is in a precarious situation. So the level of stress and trauma and support that those students needed. But also, I just think that it's kind of been exciting to be a part of the disruption. I'm not going to talk too much longer, sorry. But anyway, because all of this has forced us, exactly like everyone has said, to look at why are we doing what we're doing, and can we do things differently? And even if we look at the tragedy around residential schools and the sort of ripple of awareness around the impact of colonization on all of our systems, and it's causing us to really question, why do we do what we do? And I think that's super exciting that we are asking those questions. I don't have all the answers, but I've got a couple from this conference, and I'm excited about it. And yeah, thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Callie. I think you raised some interesting thoughts, and I think I love the and I may actually quote you, that a good teacher is a good teacher, and that's a neat idea. And so what we have found in our research here is that some students are saying that teaching in some areas has been better in the online world than it was in person, and in some cases not so well. And so for us, I think it's starting to get to a point of trying to figure out what's the balance. What are the pieces of this COVID experience that we want to take forward with us? What are the pieces of the face-to-face prior experience that we want to go forward with? And what are the pieces of each of them, maybe, that we don't? And I think that's an ongoing discussion that we're certain to have. I have another question I'll throw out. I have a hand. Oh, did Jill raise her hand there? Jump right in.
Yes, I had my hand up, but then you were pivoting, so I took it down.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, one of the things that I'm quite intrigued by is the possibility for approaching instruction from a more hybrid model. And in the winter, I will be piloting a hybrid model of the course that I teach at the University of Saskatchewan. I'm remaining remote in the fall, but because I saw that there were elements of the online classroom that actually were quite effective, I want to hold on to some of those elements even as I return to in-person instruction. The nature of my course means that I think the in-person component is incredibly important, because it's all about forging communities and peer networks for international graduate students. But at the same time, I think the online discussion, that was very fruitful, and it also helped ensure that students heard more perspectives. Because in a classroom setting, even if you're in a small group or in the class as a whole, at most you're usually going to hear from maybe 4 or 5 other students in that given class, because you're going to have more dominant speakers, or you end up sitting with the same people all the time. And with the online discussion, I found that students were more likely to hear from a greater number of their classmates. So that's something that I think I'm going to keep going forward in the winter.
Yeah, that's interesting stuff, and I think we'll do more of that. I'm going to ask Nabucco to jump in here, if she might, and explain the HyFlex model that's starting to get some currency. Nabucco?
Sure. You know, sorry, I'm working at a different desk this morning. The HyFlex model is different from the hybrid model because it allows the student to decide if they want to attend class in person or face-to-face. So with a hybrid, technically, you don't, students have the flexibility, but they don't necessarily choose in some cases of what the instructor chooses to blend. Some things like online discussions are online, and then they have some face-to-face activities. Now, at our institutions, Clayton, it's a little bit complicated by the fact that students have to register for to attend as online students or as on-campus students, and there are only a small number of spots for the online sessions. And then the HyFlex model, and I was a HyFlex student at University of Toronto. It gives students the flexibility when they can to attend face-to-face, and if they have inclement weather or they have other responsibilities at home like kids or caring for sick family members or work or what have you, the opportunity to join in online. I'd love to hear if other people have had success with the HyFlex model at their institutions. As a student, I love that flexibility because I had a commute from, I lived in Peterborough for my PhD, and I attended classes and meetings and so on at the OISE, which is Ontario Institute for Studies in Education, and that was a 2-hour door-to-door commute for me each way. So I'm going to turn it over to others to put their thoughts in.
Yeah, let me reflect on that for just a moment. So
Sure.
What we have is various models, it seems to me, for delivering. I'll be an administrator for just a second. And so we have this whole notion of completely online, which could be just remote, or it could be asynchronous, could be either or a blending of those. We have hybrid, which was mentioned a minute ago. And with hybrid, the student can opt into one or the other, whatever they're most comfortable with, or HyFlex, where they choose one or the other, but have to stick with it. At least that's how the current model is working at our institution. One of the things that would interest me, and if this interests any of you, let us know, is to be interested in some research that would compare how students learn, but also what their satisfaction is with those various different levels. If that happens to interest you, feel free to drop me a note, and because that sounds like a topic that we would be willing to work on. Okay, I'm going to, first of all, is there anyone else who has a comment or a question? There, okay, so I'll move to our next question, and that is, what's the most interesting, profound topic or finding from yesterday's presentations in your opinion? What was the most profound thing that you heard? Most profound. Nabucco, I know you have some profound thoughts. So why don't you start us off?
Probably sure.
From the list you, in fact, compiled with your colleague.
For me, the most profound thing would be in terms of enhancing international students' experiences, this notion of inclusivity, and both keynotes and many of the sessions talked about that, and whether it's access through open educational resources or learning management systems like Nadia was talking about, in that sort of blue sky university model, or whether we're talking about Jess Mitchell's kind of inclusivity, whether it's it's more like an openness to consider new models of teaching and learning. For me, that was the most profound, because listening to the students and to the faculty perspectives on teaching online with international students, that was really important to me, that to promote a learning environment that felt safe, where the instructor cared, and the other students, the domestic students, kind of had a better idea of what the international students' experiences were. And I think Shami and Chenzi, they really brought it home for me, where they felt, from international student perspective, they felt that it was like a marketing ploy to say that, you know, the university was promoting international student enrollment, and they were promoting anti-racist initiatives, but it didn't seem like the institution was doing enough to make that happen for international students in their student experience. So we can all do more, for sure.
Yeah, it's getting beyond this talk to act.
Yeah, but I mean, in terms of research topics, I'm sure people can come up with directions around that. Or did you want to keep it a little narrower?
Well, it's a good question. I see Juan's hand is up. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So, a very interesting, profound metaphor. It was the iceberg metaphor. Not only because the iceberg is really profound, but it's because we only are grasping the surface of what we are doing in education. So all education movements and challenges are visible in a very, I would say, most superficial level. And then probably we need to start thinking how to address these superficial issues, but also start thinking about the fundamentals of education. And then going back to the fundamentals of education is going to give us the opportunity to make more inclusive and justice systems. And that is probably what is resonating with me with several presentations. First, pointing the disconnection, one thing that we know in education, the disconnection between reality and the academic world, disconnection with the individuality and community, disconnection between what is happening out there and what we are teaching. So it's asking us, if you think about for a moment, like a new ethics of education, and asking us this postmodern way to understand how education can be a really challenging method or way to create better societies. And that is probably what is very profound from yesterday. And it resonates with my presentation is going to be a little bit addressing these topics in a few minutes. So it's a little bit advertising. So
advertising is okay. Self-promotion is okay. Are there any other thoughts about what was perhaps the most profound thing that you learned or heard about yesterday? Louisa.
Yeah, I actually thought that Dr. Kathy Miyata's presentation on the first part of her presentation on how she connected with her students on like storytelling and how she may have made some mistakes in her life, and that was kind of the embarrassing side, and like humanizing her teaching was really important. Instead of going right into the topic that she was going to teach for the class, she wanted to first establish that connection with students. And I think that those few minutes, maybe 5-10 minutes that we spend with our students at the beginning of the class are so important. So I thought that her whole presentation on like I would never try to like tell my students the mistakes that I've made in the past, because you try to like avoid that topic, right? You want them to, you know, to respect you, to admire you, to learn from you. But I thought that was really humbling to kind of share the things that you have experienced in the past where you've made mistakes. So that was really profound to me too.
Of course, I would argue that that might work in a face-to-face class as well.
Absolutely.
But I think the comment you're making there is the whole idea that we need to make connections. And what we're hearing from students over and over and over again is that sometimes we're able to achieve that, but in many cases we're not. And so we need to think on and think more intentionally about how we create connection, how we create community. And the other thing that we're starting to hear is that students want to connect with each other, and not just necessarily through discussion boards, but in some other ways too. And so some sort of creative thought about how it is that we might enhance that could be of some value as well. Other thoughts on the most profound thing you heard yesterday? Okay, so I have a different question, and this one is, how different should classrooms and teaching be in the online setting? Can most of it stay the same, or you think there needs to be a larger shift? So what we're hearing is that many faculty merely took their class and just made it remote or made it asynchronous, but in many cases the change hasn't occurred. What are the changes do you think might be needed if we were to continue with this online work? I see Francis's hand up.
Hi again. I'm really enjoying this session. My students, first year education students straight out of high school, and when I taught them in their second semester, it was the first synchronous class that they had. And what they said to me was they had, as you mentioned, instructors who would put a lecture on, an hour-and-a-half lecture, and they would have to watch an hour-and-a-half lecture. I'm coming to the feeling or the understanding, and I would never say this to my students, but bad teaching is bad teaching, good teaching is good teaching. And how do we convince our colleagues? I hate to be so judgmental, but how do we teach our colleagues just to be better teachers, no matter what the platform? Because I just felt so bad for those students, and they were so engaged in the online platform. And mind you, these were not international students. So although, no, in one term, a student who I had taught before, an international student who I had taught before, who was taking the course again in an online format, and she blossomed, which was fascinating to me. She blossomed in the online format. She never went on screen, but she was very much a presence. And the other students engaged really enthusiastically, where in the online or in the in-person format, she was very isolated. And other students, it wasn't possible to break down those barriers. So those are a couple of my observations, I guess.
Francis, like you, I teach, well, I think like you, first year education students, amongst others. I actually teach all the way through to the PhD, but I do teach some first year education students. And I was teaching this class in what we call our concurrent education program here, which is a blending of an academic major and the education major together over a 5-year program. And the students who were taking their 5 academic courses plus my education course that semester said to me much the same thing you're just saying, and that is that this is the only class that I have that's synchronous. Everything else is asynchronous. And then they went on to be quiet for most of the rest of the class. And then at the end of the class, when the class would end, and normally, class ends and you walk out of the room kind of a thing. And in this case, because it was virtual, I didn't have to do that. And so essentially, I just stayed after class, and these students went on for another 2 hours of discussion because they were so starved for interaction between each other. And so I think that speaks to how important it is to find a way for people to connect with people, and not just through technology, or not only through technology. So a good thought. Other thoughts on things that we need to be doing perhaps differently as we continue in the online world that maybe we've tried or we're thinking about doing? Other things. Okay, how about another question? What do you think the future holds regarding online learning? What's the future look like? Louisa.
I know I am that one student in the front of the class that always has her hand up, so I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Last one. When I started my education about 10, 15 years ago, I loved online learning because it allowed me to stay home with my son and, still have a full-time job. But I think online learning at that point was very much into like discussions. What's your opinion on this? And just kind of reply to a question at that point. I think we are at a very important point where we have so many other digital tools that we can apply to our classes. So I think as far as what I can see, and I'm actually finishing a master's degree, searching for a PhD, which is one of the reasons why I decided to join this symposium, is because I want to have more digital tools, maybe learn a little about coding, web creating. I think that was one of the challenges that a lot of the faculty's members went into, like they were in that tech savvy. I think course design is important, things that we bring into the curriculum, interactive activities. The students love interactive activities when they're online. They want to be engaged, they want to use their cell phones. So I think that that's part of what we need to move towards. Like the education part, we being instructors and teachers continues to be at the center of it. But we have to be able to utilize the technology available, not just like meeting the students online, but also providing those resources that they can learn from, and we, being tech savvy, can provide for them. That's my little 5 cents, and I'll shut up from this point. I'll be quiet.
Okay, Jill.
Hi, sort of similar to the previous comments. I think that there is a lot of scope for innovation. It might sound a little bit strange, but even just thinking about how virtual reality consoles are now available for purchase for in-home use, I think that is an area where education will likely start taking advantage of for certain types of learning. But at the same time, I'm also a little bit concerned that a lot of institutions, especially universities that have very strong traditions, are going to be reluctant to actually make use of a lot of the lessons that we've learned in the last year and a half. I think that there's going to be a really interesting distinction that emerges between how universities conceptualize what they are. And I think some of them are going to say, no, we are an in-person institution, and that's what makes us this specific brand. So I think there's going to be some really interesting roads that are going to be forged in terms of how students make some of the choices around how they're going to access education at the post-secondary level.
Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for that. Angela.
Yeah, I think that when, in lots of the discussion that we've had about ungrading, I think that that's really where I see a revolution in education across the board and not just online, although I think it's especially important online. And I almost think that, 100 years from now, I think we might look back on the injustice that we've done through ranking and filing students, almost like we look at the strap back in the day, right? Of, where we have these practices that we know are really harmful for students. And so I hope that we can start that, that revolution today and go forward together towards that.
Sounds like there's a lot of interest, at least at discussing it further, perhaps in trying some different approaches. Yeah, very good. I'm going to reach to one of my students. Gabriella, are you able to come to the mic?
Yeah, sure.
Can you share us your perspective on what you think the future of online learning should be from a student perspective?
Okay, should I turn on my camera or can I speak like that?
That's entirely up to you.
Yeah, so about the future, well, I think that like viewing about like just talking with other students, with my peers, I have noticed that some of them found online learning much more comfortable. And as I saw in the comments and in of other people, that some people could actually bloom, so to say, in online learning, comparing to like real learning experiences. So I think that just giving more choice is always. So for example, some people can study in like in universities, so in real life, and others can actually choose online courses. And I think that should be valid. Yeah, and actually I was writing here a huge comment about asynchronous and synchronous learning. So as I think that in Canada there are more asynchronous courses, but in my country it was quite different because all classes were synchronous and it was really exhausting.
Can you say what your country is?
Oh, Ukraine. So I come from Ukraine and I'm studying in Kyiv. And even lectures were not recorded, but it was like a real class. So it was like an imitation of real classes. And I think it was a bit of problematic because online is not the real class. And when teachers were trying to mimic the real learning environment, it was just very exhausting, I think. Maybe, like in my opinion, it is better to mix a lot of models of learning. So being not only online, like synchronous, but also do some individual work or teamwork, or just giving these lectures, but not all of them, of course. Just, yes, it was, I think I've heard this opinion before yesterday that when it's online, you have to mix a lot of activities more comparing to real education, but it's important not to mix up that real education is different. Of course, it shouldn't be like if you are going online, it doesn't have to be the same.
I'm very intrigued with your use of the word real versus online.
Well, it's like, I don't know what word to use in this case. It's personal, it's in real life. I mean it in real life, so to say.
But I think your concept of some form of hybrid learning is to take advantage of, if you will, the best pieces of both and combine them together in some manner has certainly some merit and merits more discussion. Okay, I have a hand up from Unsub Khan.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Wonderful. So I thought that some of the points that Gabriella was making were really interesting and right on. I teach at a private school that was 100% in person, and then following the schedules of the public schools, they went remote. And at the beginning of that, I did the exact same thing that I would do in person online. And I very, very quickly found that I could do it. I could just mute everyone and talk, right? But I found that it wasn't beneficial. The students weren't engaging. It was harder actually to engage them with just what I was saying online. And so I did have to intersperse activities in there. So even though we were covering maybe less material, like less ground was being covered, I could cover it deeper with the different kinds of activities that I could use. For example, like with English grammar, I could teach them about nouns in a way that even though we covered less of the curriculum, they went deeper into it because they were breaking apart for activities, they were going on these websites and like playing these little games, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think what I'm trying to talk to about with my board is to have a hybrid. I think that that should be the way forward for everyone, no matter what the age bracket. Obviously, I taught grades 3 to 8, so there's different things to do for different age brackets, but I think that that's the best way forward.
Yeah, it's one of these, in a prior life, I was the registrar here at the university, and I have to admit that I'm somewhat sensitive to what just the practical considerations here are. And so on the higher ed side, it's about classrooms. And that is that if we have a class that a teacher is using a classroom, and they're using some of the time they're going to be online, and some of that they're going to be in person, they still need the classroom. So it's a bit about physical facilities here that begins to be a challenge at the post-secondary level. Maybe less of a concern at the elementary and secondary level, but something that's out there for sure. Okay, Louisa, you still have your hand up. Did you mean to ask a question or make a comment?
No, I'm sorry. I'm learning.
That's okay. That's okay. All right, I'm going to move to another question, and that is, do you think that we should go back to face-to-face? Do you think we should just not do this online thing? What do you thought? Angela. Well, excuse me, Colleen first. Colleen. You can go ahead if you'd like. Okay, maybe.
Oh, there. Yeah, I forgot to unmute. Yeah, I just wanted to say I've been teaching online cohorts for a number of years now from Moise. And, the courses have always tended to be asynchronous just because of the time zone issue. So I've always set up small groups, and I've learned not to micromanage. I started off by setting up small groups according to time zone, because I thought that would be the most convenient for students. I found that if I said you need to meet at some point before the end of Friday in order to discuss such and such, and post your summary online, that was fine. And they chose a whole different variety of platforms in order to meet, and they met at very different times. But I also discovered that students didn't always want to meet for convenience, time zone convenience. Like the students in Brazil wanted to have a chance to talk to the students in Hong Kong, and the students in Ontario wanted to have a chance to talk to the people in Kenya. So I've stopped micromanaging, and I have found that students are very willing to share convenience. It didn't always default to the times that fit with the dominant culture with Ontario. So yeah, I found there's been a great deal of give and take in the online world.
Yeah, I think that just the notion of flexibility, which is something students raise over and over again, is how important it is to be flexible, whether it's flexible in your grading, whether it's flexible in your assignments, flexible in the way you deliver content, flexible in the way in which we help them engage together. This flexibility is, I think, an interesting research topic, because what an instructor needs to be flexible in one mode may be different than what they need to be in another one. Okay, Angela, jump right in.
Sorry, it's always a delay on Teams. Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. You had asked, should we get rid of this online stuff? And I think that it's all about choice for students. I know that I'm a curriculum and instruction specialist at NAIT, the Northern Alberta Institute of Technology. I'm also a PhD student at the U of A in the Faculty of Education. But we did a survey of all of the students across the institution, asking whether they'd like to stay online, go back to in person, or have a blended or hybrid model. And about 30% said online only, about 30% said face-to-face, or 35%. And the rest were that they wanted some kind of a hybrid or a blended model where they could maybe have some courses, especially because we're a polytechnic, some things that have more applied kind of lab shop stuff in person, but other things that are more kind of theory-based or didactic, kind of more in the cognitive realm, would be online, sorry. And so I think that where possible, so I'm specifically kind of tied to the School of Business, where we have 50 sections of the same course. So one of the things that we've been doing throughout the pandemic that I think has been successful is to very clearly mark whether something is synchronous or asynchronous. And of course, there's always, all synchronous courses have an element of asynchronous, and all asynchronous may, has some touch points, right? But that way, if a student signs up for a synchronous course, they know this is the time. So in terms of time zones and stuff, if you're an international student, does this work for you? So it's not, trying to come up with it after the fact. When you register that this is the time that you'll be meeting. Or you could choose to do asynchronous, which gives that a little bit more flexibility. And I think that that's what's exciting going forward. It's a lot harder, of course, if you only have one section of a course offered for the whole year, how to determine what it should be. But
Angela, I was teaching an educational leadership PhD class last fall, and in our joint PhD program, which is between 3 universities here in Ontario, we promote it as asynchronous classes. So it's promoted, and so students expect asynchronous. And so just prior to the first meeting, I asked them how they'd like to meet. And I said, I'm willing to meet synchronously with you periodically. And all of them asked for synchronous meeting, but not completely. And so what we decided to do is we would read a content area and various readings over a 2-week period, and then the postings would take place and so forth. And then that next meeting would be a chance to talk about those things. And I would lead the questions, if you will, and they would, engage in the conversation and so forth. And they were just totally taken with this ability to connect in this way through this technology, because they couldn't otherwise have this. They couldn't have a face-to-face class because they were all in different places. And yet they were saying asynchronous wasn't enough. And so I think even at the PhD, the very motivated, the very hard-working group that they are, that you know all about, is there still this sense that we have to connect as human beings? We can't do everything through the postings. And I suppose that's the part that intrigues me, is that I'm an old-fashioned teacher in many ways, and I like the in-person. I like being able to connect with my students, and the best part of my day is when I get to chat with students in my office, in the hallways, and that's just why I'm in higher education. So when this whole online thing came along, I thought, wow, are we losing something? But what we're starting to find out, and what intrigues me, is that we can actually do some things that we couldn't do before. And I think that's a neat thing. So thanks for your thoughts. What I'd like to do in the last little bit of time that we have, I've been sort of warming you up to this point, is I'd like to talk about some research topics and see if there might be folks who, with an interest in seeing research done, maybe some research you've been thinking about, maybe some research that came as a result of what you engaged in yesterday, to see if we might be able to engage in some topics in this forum that perhaps we can match you up, or I'll at least throw those topics out and see who's interested in it in some post-symposium communications. Because one of the things that we're thinking about with the symposium is that it doesn't stop here. That what we've done here is start a conversation. So we brought together the research that we knew about that maybe people would be interested in learning more about. We brought together a group of people, 600 plus people, 43 countries, over 100 presenters. And the thought is that maybe some of you might want to be doing research together. And so what I'd like to do, if I might, in this time, is just to throw out some topics. If you were to engage in a study in the next year or so around this whole topic of international student teaching online, or even wider than that, just international teaching international students, what kind of research would you be interested in? What would you want to engage in? Drop a thought in the chat. Grab your mic, and let's see what's going on out there. Now stop talking. I'll let you do some talking. Juan, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Clayton. So definitely. So I would love to have the opportunity to create a collaborative course between all participants from different universities, and explore in reality something like a research action, like a research by teaching, having the experience and doing a reflection of the experiential process of teaching together. That would be like I am interested in that. If I would love to hear if anybody else would be able to join this initiative, just to work in a collaborative model of teaching together.
Wonderful, wonderful. We'll certainly put that on our list, and we'll be sharing those as we go out. Somebody else, what are you thinking about doing? Well, while you're thinking, I have Gabriella. Go ahead, Gabriella.
Yeah, so it's concerning what Juan said right now. So I had experiences during online learning. So it's not really about research, but it's more like an initiative. So our university has partner universities, and what happened was that teachers said, why not students visit online lectures of other teachers? So I think that actually teachers here could maybe talk with each other and find some courses that they would like to share with other students from other universities, because for me it was a really interesting experience that I could visit some other lectures in other universities. And yeah, sometimes it's complicated because universities have to have that partnership, and if they don't, then you cannot visit these online courses, and it's always like closed and behind the doors, like that you cannot visit these lectures. But if some people just share their classes with others, it's really interesting, in my opinion.
Okay, that's an interesting topic. Thanks for that. I want to talk to you a little bit more about that after the symposium. Other people, other topics that you're thinking about? Well, while you're thinking, let me throw out some of mine. Before I do, Angela just jumped in. Go ahead, Angela.
Well, I posted this earlier, and I don't know if it's directly related to just teaching online, but again, since kind of the theme that we've had or we've seen as this ungrading, and as others have mentioned today, that you know, the fear comes from a system that requires grades, right? So I think it might be interesting to have a participatory action research across, or like that involves collaboration from different institutions to think about how to mobilize away from grades and sorting. And it could even involve student associations and faculty associations, or but you know, where we could think of, you know, try to develop practices about how to Callie, my Alberta girl is with me. She's also my Disney competitor. I saw yesterday, so I was Scoobs. So, but yeah, I think that would be really interesting to see if there could be research that would also promote movement towards more equitable assessment, or towards better learning.
Well, that's an interesting, your words, more equitable assessment. It may lead you to ungrading. Mm-hmm. It may lead you to changes in the way assessment is done. Mm-hmm. And I think we heard from Jess a little bit yesterday is that, that's kind of a pathway that she's chosen to focus on. They're going to get a grade, but mm-hmm. The question is how, and is there a role for students in that process? I think that's huge. And who knows, maybe this is the kind of research to start off the revolution.
Mm-hmm. Yep, there you go. Yeah, and it's interesting that it's come up, the ungrading, because I've been looking at more the equitable grading. There's a book called Grading for Equity, and was thinking of doing, because I part of my role is to help promote scholarly activity within the School of Business at NAIT. And so to see if we could do some kind of participatory action research at the school level about equitable grading. But, again, if we're looking at things kind of broader across institutions, it might be interesting to see where that could potentially lead us. As you said, there's different roads, right?
Would you be interested in doing that within the online setting or just in any setting?
I think it would be both, because we have, I don't know about how other institutions are functioning, but right now, the way our policies and procedures are set up is that each course has an outline that is consistent for whoever's teaching it. So it's basically, it determines right there what the assessment structure is, and it has to be consistent regardless of modality.
Sure.
So that's the, so that kind of, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thanks for that. Colleen, you still have your hand up. Do you have something? Colleen?
Sorry, no, I forgot to take it down.
That's okay. Thanks for that. So let me just share a couple of thoughts that we have here. We have a project that we're looking to start up this next year. We're going to go down to the high school level and ask about a sense of belonging, because what we found in our conversations both yesterday and in our research before that is how important the whole idea is that people feel like they belong where they are, and how difficult it is for people from other cultures and linguistic traditions and so forth to connect. And so what we want to do is identify what are some of the best ways that folks have found for doing that, and see if we can identify some pathways to bringing them forward into a school board. So that's one topic that we're looking at. A second topic we're looking at is this whole idea of microaggressions and how it is that international students are experiencing racism in our institutions. Some years ago, when I was still a vice provost and dean of students, I did a year-long research project with some grad students, and what we learned was that the things that were most troubling about student retention between first and second year undergraduate international students were some basic things. They were certainly language and certainly culture. But the next one on the list, no matter who we spoke to, was racism. And that is that international students were interacted with in disparate sorts of ways, some of which were unpleasant, some of which were inappropriate, some of which were racism. And so what we're going to do now 10 years later, is take a look at that again to see if this idea of the microaggression is really the place to look. So those are two projects that we have in our radar, but certainly interested in others should you have any. So are there any other research topics you want to throw out just for good of the order? We'll be making a list of these, and I'll try to connect people who have an interest in those sorts of things. I'll just give you a minute. And I'm always forgetting the chat. And I see a few. I'll pick up these ideas that are in the chat and add those to our list as well. Excellent. I see some interest in some of those projects. Okay, so what I'd like to do in just a couple of minutes that we have left here is to ask you for your opinion. I'm gonna let you be a focus group for a moment. And that is that, as I said earlier, this is our first symposium of this type. It could be our only one. It could be the beginning of something. If we were to hold a symposium like this next year, A, is it something that would interest you? B, is there a particular theme that you think it ought to have? This year it was about online instruction. What kinds of areas do you think it ought to focus on? So should we do it? Should we just do a one and done, or should we grab a theme and do something different next year? Should we build on research? What should we do? I'll just pause for a second and give you a chance to drop your thoughts either in the chat or to grab your microphone. Francis.
Yes, I think I would be interested in hearing about research, that the various research projects that people are working on, because that's the sense. This is teaching international students. I'm a historian of education, so but I teach international students, and my interest in this symposium was, how can I better teach my international students? But the research that everybody is doing is fascinating, and so even just sharing, or maybe that's what a symposium, no matter what topic you would choose, people would be sharing their research. But I feel this is outside of my field, and it's fascinating to hear about the work that people are doing, and to I'm sort of making lists of what research I want to take a deeper look into to help me with my teaching. But also I think I'm going to go back to my university and proselytize a little bit, because so far as I can tell, I'm the only person from my university who's here. I may be wrong, but I've got a bit of a fire in my belly. So
okay. So Francis, you're suggesting that we continue this, certainly to share more the research that's going on. But my related question is, should it be focused on the online experience, or should it be broader than that next time?
I think it could be broader. The other key point, I think, is student voice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hearing
from the learners has been really moving for me, and really transformational. And I think that element, whatever you tend to focus on, inviting as many international students as possible to talk about their experience of being educated as an international student, I think that is key for people like me who work in the university to hear. Because I'm a professor in a faculty of education who doesn't work with many international students, but I need to hear their voices.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that we've been trying to do with our research group is actually find those voices. And we tried to bring it in a little bit into the symposium, but there was a thirst for something a bit more than that. And so we let it go broader this time, but definitely a student voice would be of great interest to us. Thank you for that. Jill, you had a comment?
Yeah, sort of building on that notion of voice. One of the things that I find very frustrating as an educator, and I've worked at a couple of different universities in Canada, is that I've heard administrators at universities explicitly refer to international students as a revenue stream, which I find hugely problematic, because then often, depending on the institution, the students are not sufficiently supported. And so I find that that is a very poor way to forge international relationships, because it is, we encourage people to come and then treat them differently in terms of the amount of money that they have to pay, and then not setting them up for the same success because of some of those gaps that might exist and where they might require some additional support. So that's something that I would like to interrogate, and see if anyone has solutions to this issue, or if they've had similar thoughts on this topic.
Jill, I love the topic, and it is something that is a lot of folks have been interested in for some time. I have to tell you, as someone who helped to develop the internationalization strategy here at this university and supported it at a couple others, that it's always been a challenge to get beyond this notion of revenue generation that international students can and do provide, to this idea of internationalization for our domestic, our international students, our faculty, so that our learners, if you will, have a global perspective. And I think that that's huge, and it really gets to the ethics of what we're all about. It's one thing to have a business model; it's quite something else to play it out. And so I'll certainly add that as a topic. Anything else you think we should focus on as we go forward into next year? And let's see if there's anything in the chat that I'm getting to. Yeah, there's all sorts of things here. We'll mine the chat for all of this as we go forward. All right, if you would, let me sort of bring this to a close, because we're coming to the end of our time together in this session. What follows this is a break. You have about a half-hour break, and then we will move 1 o'clock Eastern time to current scholarship sharing session number 3. And then immediately after that, we will be doing concurrent scholarship session 4. And then after a short break, a joint panel discussion with both the international students and the emerging scholars and faculty. So we'll have a chance to talk and bring those groups together. And then lastly, we'll have Dr. Bonnie and Nabucco give us their rendition of what they heard, what they felt, what they thought about the day's events, and then we'll wrap it up a little bit after that. So let me stop here. Thank you all for participating, and I look forward to engaging you through the balance of the day and after the symposium. Thanks, everyone.